What if I told you that behind the golden palaces, trillion-dollar ambitions and global power plays, Mohammed bin Salman lives a life more secretive and more dangerous than the world ever sees? Tonight, you'll step inside the machinery of wealth, influence and control that surrounds the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. And if you watch until the end, you'll uncover the one decision that could redefine the future of the entire Middle East, a truth rarely revealed. The making of MBS, a prince nobody expected. In the final years of King Abdullah's reign, Mohammed bin Salman remained a relatively obscure prince, present in photographs but rarely at the center of official decision-making. Inside Riyadh's palaces, older royals continued decades-old traditions, believing power would naturally pass to senior branches of the family. Yet behind the scenes, MBS moved with a quiet intensity, serving as an advisor to his father, King Salman, building networks among young technocrats and studying the machinery of state with the focus of someone preparing for a much larger role. When King Salman ascended the throne in 2015, the entire royal hierarchy shifted. At just 30 years old, MBS was appointed Minister of Defense, a position typically reserved for the kingdom's most experienced figures. Diplomats described the move as unprecedented. US officials were reportedly stunned to see such a young prince overseeing one of the region's most powerful militaries. The emotional dip arrived almost immediately. Within months, MBS oversaw Saudi Arabia's intervention in Yemen, an operation launched in March 2015 that marked his emergence on the world stage while exposing him to intense scrutiny. International observers debated whether the campaign signaled strategic decisiveness or a risky acceleration of regional tensions. Inside the royal family, some questioned the speed of his rise and the boldness of his decisions, yet MBS continued consolidating influence, taking on roles in economic planning councils and securing influence over the kingdom's sovereign wealth strategy. A turning point came in June 2017 when Mohammed bin Nayef, the long-respected crown prince and security leader, was relieved of his position. MBS was named crown prince, placing him directly in line for the throne. Official statements framed the transition as consensual, but analysts around the world noted how swiftly power had shifted. After the announcement, MBN largely withdrew from public view, underscoring the magnitude of the moment. With the title of Crown Prince, MBS gained authority over national reforms, foreign policy, and the vast financial assets that underpin Saudi Arabia's global influence. As he stood before the nation, addressing a new generation eager for change, one reality became clear. In less than 2 years, MBS had transformed from a quiet royal advisor into one of the most consequential leaders of the Middle East, carrying both the promise of modernization and the weight of an ancient monarchy entering a volatile century. Vision 2030, Saudi Arabia's multi-trillion-dollar reinvention. Long before the rest of Riyadh wakes, Mohammed bin Salman studies a series of blueprints stretched across a marble conference table, designs that look less like government plans and more like concept art for a future civilization. These documents form the backbone of Vision 2030, a multi-trillion-dollar transformation plan meant to pull Saudi Arabia out of its historic dependence on oil, which still accounts for nearly 80% of government revenue. For a moment, the numbers offer clarity. SoftBank investments, sovereign wealth reallocations, and rising tourism forecasts paint a picture of a kingdom determined to step beyond the limitations of the past. At the center of it all is NEOM, a planned smart city priced at over $500 billion, stretching across desert, mountains, and coastline, an urban project 100 times the size of Paris. But the emotional dip arrives when internal reports begin surfacing across the table. Investor after investor expresses hesitation. Construction delays push timelines. Some early partners privately question whether a linear city in the desert can truly host millions. Red Sea tourism projects face rising material costs, while industrial gigazones designed to attract global manufacturing struggle to overcome regional logistical challenges. Cabinet memos warn that Saudi Arabia's youth population, 70% under the age of 30, demands immediate economic opportunity, not promises on distant blueprints. And behind all of it lies a global concern. Can an economy built for decades on petroleum truly pivot fast enough to compete in a world turning toward green energy? Then the breakthrough emerges, subtle at first, then unmistakable. Global PR campaigns flood financial capitals from New York to Tokyo. Investment forums in Davos feature Saudi delegations promoting technology zones, AI innovation hubs and renewable energy clusters. Early partnerships begin forming around hydrogen, digital infrastructure and luxury tourism. Data from pilot districts show rising foreign interest, especially in projects where the government co-invests through the Public Investment Fund, now valued at more than $700 billion. Slowly, skepticism begins to soften. As the sun rises over the capital, MBS steps onto a balcony overlooking a city of cranes, construction, dust and ambition. Vision 2030 is not merely an economic plan, it is a race against time, against oil decline and against global doubt. If this were your kingdom, would you bet everything on reinvention? Tell me in the comments. Social revolution, freedom wrapped in control. But before the evening lights rise over Riyadh's new entertainment districts, Mohammed bin Salman reviews a dossier thick with cultural reforms, pages that capture the most dramatic social shift Saudi Arabia has seen in decades. For a moment, the numbers look almost surreal. Attendance reports from newly opened cinemas show tens of thousands of young Saudis filling theaters each weekend. Live event venues, once unimaginable in the kingdom, now host concerts featuring regional superstars and international performers under multi-million-dollar production rigs. The government's entertainment authority posts rising revenues from festivals, award shows and multi-day celebrations designed to energize a population where 70% is under the age of 30. The emotional dip emerges not from the successes, but from the conflicts beneath them. When MBS abolished the Mutawa, the religious police that once enforced strict public behavior, he set off a cultural recalibration that shook conservative clerics and emboldened liberal youth at the same time. Gender-segregated spaces began to dissolve. Women finally received licenses to drive, and car dealerships across the kingdom reported unprecedented surges in female customers purchasing their first vehicles. But behind these headline-friendly changes were deeper tensions. Security agencies monitored activists who demanded more rights than the state was ready to grant. Some who pushed beyond the boundaries of official reform found themselves under investigation, revealing a paradox: modernity delivered with one hand and restricted with the other. Yet the breakthrough unfolds across the vast Vision Boulevard in Riyadh, where luxury storefronts glow beneath LED screens, families stroll past themed restaurants, and music drifts from outdoor speakers. This is the Saudi Arabia MBS envisions, a curated blend of openness and control. Billions of dollars flow into cultural development, esports arenas, film festivals, fashion weeks and creative incubators designed to produce a new generation of artists and digital talent. The kingdom's entertainment sector, once non-existent, now aims to rival regional hubs like Dubai and global markets eager for investment partners. As the city skyline pulses with the energy of a society unlocking itself, MBS surveys the transformation from a vantage point only a crown prince can occupy. The reforms reflect a deliberate strategy, loosen the social fabric just enough to energize the economy and youth culture, but tighten the political thread to ensure stability. In this delicate balance, Saudi Arabia steps into the future, brighter, louder, and more complex than ever before. The billion-dollar purge, power, wealth, and the Ritz-Carlton. Long before midnight settled over Riyadh in November 2017, the Ritz-Carlton was quietly emptied of guests. Limousines rolled away, the last diplomats checked out, and security teams sealed the gates. Within hours, the five-star hotel, known for chandeliers carved from crystal and suites priced well over $10,000 per night, was transformed into the most luxurious detention facility in modern history. Inside its gilded halls, 380 of Saudi Arabia's most influential princes, ministers, and billionaire businessmen were summoned for what officials publicly framed as an anti-corruption initiative. But those who witnessed the operation understood its scale. This was a seismic reordering of power. The emotional dip began as names emerged. Individuals whose wealth shaped entire sectors, real estate, media, banking, telecommunications, found themselves confined to the hotel's ballrooms and private wings. Negotiators arrived with binders of financial records, detailing decades of transactions the state now questioned. Some detainees faced demands to surrender assets. Others were offered financial settlements to resolve allegations. Over weeks, the process resulted in the recovery of nearly $100 billion in property, cash, equity and land holdings, an amount unprecedented for a single campaign. International investors watched with unease. Foreign boards questioned the stability of contracts tied to companies whose founders were now in controlled negotiations. Inside Saudi Arabia, elite families reassessed alliances forged over decades. Yet the breakthrough unfolded behind the palace walls, where the Crown Prince mapped out a strategy far deeper than asset recovery. By removing entrenched figures who held influence across key sectors, Mohammed bin Salman redrew the internal power map. The Public Investment Fund, already one of the largest sovereign wealth funds on earth, accelerated into a new phase, expanding globally into technology, entertainment, tourism and renewable energy. Capital once dispersed among competing royal networks flowed inward, centralized under a single vision for the kingdom's transformation. As weeks passed, some detainees secured release after signing agreements, others remained under ongoing investigation. The Ritz-Carlton reopened months later, its marble floors polished as if nothing had happened. But among those who understood the kingdom's inner mechanics, the purge marked something irreversible. For the first time in generations, power in Saudi Arabia was no longer decentralized. It was consolidated in the hands of a leader determined to reshape the nation's economic and political future with unprecedented force. MBS versus Iran, the Middle East power struggle. When dawn begins to rise over the Red Sea, Mohammed bin Salman is already immersed in intelligence briefings layered with satellite images, defense maps and economic data that reveal the scale of the rivalry shaping his region. For decades, Saudi Arabia and Iran have orbited each other like opposing stars, each pulling the Middle East into its gravitational field. But under MBS, the competition transformed into something sharper, faster, and unmistakably personal. His first major act as Minister of Defense in 2015 was authorizing the intervention in Yemen, a decision that thrust him onto the global stage and into a conflict where alliances, air power, and proxy forces would test the limits of Saudi influence. The emotional dip begins with the realities of that war and the broader regional dynamics it exposed. Despite Saudi Arabia spending billions each year and could buy one of the world's largest defense budgets, its military remains vulnerable to asymmetric tactics. Drones and ballistic missiles launched by Yemen's Houthi movement have at times penetrated deep into Saudi territory, targeting infrastructure tied to the kingdom's most valuable assets: pipelines, refineries and storage facilities linked to Saudi Aramco, a company valued in the trillions. In 2019, a coordinated strike temporarily cut Saudi oil output by roughly half, revealing the limits of conventional power in a region defined by unconventional warfare. Advisors warned of prolonged engagements, unpredictable escalation patterns, and the growing reach of Iran-backed groups in Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon. The breakthrough comes not from battlefield gains, but from MBS's strategic recalibration of regional influence. Saudi diplomacy intensifies across African, Gulf and Levant corridors. Investments flow through sovereign channels to shape economic alliances with countries positioned along key trade and security routes. New air defense systems are deployed, integrating advanced radar networks with multinational intelligence sharing agreements. Saudi foreign missions escalate efforts to counter narratives, influence global discussions, and build coalitions that treat the kingdom as the primary counterbalance to Iran's regional aspirations. As MBS surveys maps charting the movement of militias, shipping lanes and energy corridors, one truth becomes clear: the Middle East remains a chessboard where the most valuable pieces are not land or tanks, but influence over the systems that move energy, capital and ideology. And in this contest, the young Crown Prince is determined not merely to defend Saudi Arabia's position, but to redefine it for the next century. The Qatar blockade and foreign policy gambles. Before the desert heat settles over Riyadh, Mohammed bin Salman studies a series of diplomatic briefs laid across a polished table. Maps marked with shipping lanes, air corridors and energy routes that thread across the Gulf like arteries. In June 2017, the decision that would send shockwaves through the region was finalized. Saudi Arabia, alongside its allies, would sever ties with Qatar. Borders were sealed, airspace closed, and trade routes snapped in a coordinated move that transformed a long-simmering rivalry into a regional fracture. For a brief moment, the strategy felt precise, Advisors projected that economic pressure would force Doha to reconsider its alliances, revise its media influence, and align more closely with Saudi-led strategic objectives. But the emotional dip began almost immediately. Qatar, surrounded on three sides by desert and dependent on cross-border supply lines, was expected to fold under the weight of the blockade. Instead, it recalibrated with surprising speed. Cargo flights rerouted through Turkey and Iran, food imports redirected within days, liquefied natural gas exports, responsible for a massive portion of Qatar's national revenue, continued flowing unaffected, providing the economic cushion to withstand prolonged pressure. International reactions added to the strain. Western officials expressed concern, global investors hesitated, and energy analysts warned of volatility in a region responsible for a significant share of global supply. Meanwhile, Qatar's media networks amplified narratives that challenged the blockade, turning diplomatic tension into a global spectacle. The breakthrough for Saudi Arabia emerged not from immediate concessions, but from the long-term strategic recalibration it ignited. The blockade forced Gulf states to revisit the very architecture of their alliances. Saudi Arabia tightened ties with Egypt, deepened coordination with the UAE, and strengthened regional institutions designed to counter destabilizing influences. Sovereign investment strategies shifted, expanding Saudi outreach into East Africa and Southeast Asia, regions critical for shipping routes and food security. At the same time, Riyadh accelerated military and intelligence cooperation with key partners, reinforcing its position as the central axis of Gulf stability. In private meetings, MBS reviewed the broader implications. The blockade had revealed new geopolitical risks, but also highlighted the extent of Saudi influence when coordinating region-wide initiatives. As he evaluated the next phase of foreign policy, one truth emerged. Gulf diplomacy was no longer about maintaining balance, it was about defining the balance, and Saudi Arabia intended to shape the region's future architecture with the full weight of its political, economic, and strategic power. The Khashoggi, the scandal that shook the world. Long before the afternoon call sheets reached Riyadh, news alerts began appearing on encrypted devices across global capitals. A Saudi journalist named Jamal Khashoggi had entered the kingdom's consulate in Istanbul and had not re-emerged. At first, the event seemed like a diplomatic misunderstanding, an administrative visit gone wrong. But as hours turned to days, the world's attention locked onto the consulate's heavy steel doors, and the story transformed from a routine appointment into an international crisis that placed Mohammed bin Salman at the center of global scrutiny. Intelligence briefings circulated in Washington, London, Paris, and Ankara, each more detailed than the last, tracing timelines, travel logs, and communications that hinted at a coordinated operation. The emotional dip reached its deepest point when multiple reports, some from US agencies, suggested that senior Saudi officials had knowledge of the incident. Western media broadcast satellite images, leaked documents, and investigative findings around the clock. The kingdom's relationships with long-standing partners trembled as legislators called for sanctions, suspensions of arms sales, and formal inquiries. For Saudi Arabia, the timing could not have been worse. Oil prices were fluctuating, regional tensions with Iran were escalating, and the global perception of the Crown Prince's modernization efforts was suddenly overshadowed by a narrative darker than any Saudi crisis in decades. Yet the breakthrough came not through denial or acceptance, but through the mechanics of realpolitik. Behind closed doors, global leaders weighed strategic interests against public outrage. Saudi Arabia remained a critical actor in energy markets, stabilizing supply chains valued in the hundreds of billions. Western defense industries relied heavily on contracts linked to Riyadh, including large-scale procurement programs supporting aerospace and security sectors. Counterterrorism cooperation between Saudi agencies and Western intelligence services remained essential for mitigating threats across multiple regions. Gradually, the diplomatic tone softened. Public criticism persisted, but strategic ties endured. Inside the kingdom, MBS refocused his agenda. Cabinet councils accelerated domestic reforms, economic diversification projects continued across NEOM and the Red Sea coast, and Saudi diplomacy expanded outreach to Asia to hedge geopolitical risk. Internationally, Riyadh increased its visibility at investment forums and global summits, signaling resilience in the face of the storm. As the months passed, one reality became clear. The Khashoggi incident marked a turning point not only for Saudi Arabia's international image, but for the Crown Prince himself. The world now viewed him through a dual lens, architect of sweeping modernization and leader navigating one of the most complex reputational crises of the century. MBS and the super-luxury trillionaire lifestyle. Long after diplomatic meetings end and the palace corridors fall silent, Mohammed bin Salman steps into a world that few rulers in modern history have ever experienced. An ecosystem of wealth so vast it bends the definition of opulence. Anchored offshore is the Serene, a yacht reportedly valued at nearly $500 million, complete with helipads, an underwater viewing room, and suites designed to rival royal residences. Guests describe its interior as a floating palace, a vessel built not for travel, but for presence, an unmistakable symbol of status in the Mediterranean and Red Sea corridors. The emotional dip emerges when reports circulate across global media, questioning how such luxury fits within a kingdom pushing through economic reforms and austerity measures. Photographs of the yacht surface online. Analysts dissect ownership structures. And then another detail captures the world's attention. MBS's acquisition of Salvator Mundi, the Leonardo da Vinci painting purchased for approximately $450 million, instantly making it the most expensive artwork ever sold. Critics frame these purchases as excess. But the breakthrough becomes clear as one traces how this lifestyle functions beyond personal taste. Each asset, superyachts, rare art, private estates across Europe and aircraft interiors fitted with custom architecture, operates as soft power. They host negotiations, signal authority, and project a narrative of Saudi Arabia stepping into a league once reserved for old European monarchies. Even his private aviation fleet, featuring long-range aircraft modified with secure communication systems, becomes part of a broader geopolitical toolkit, enabling rapid diplomacy across continents. As he surveys a coastline lit by the glow of private villas and resort compounds, one truth stands out. For MBS, luxury is not the end goal. It is a language, spoken through billion-dollar assets and rare masterpieces, that communicates influence in a world where power is measured not only by military strength or economic output, but by the scale of one's presence. If you had access to this level of influence, which asset would you choose first? Comment below. For all the luxury, reform and power that shaped the world of Mohammed bin Salman, what you've just seen is only the surface of a ruler navigating a kingdom in transformation and a region in turmoil. If this deep dive into one of the most powerful figures on Earth captivated you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because in part 2, we'll uncover the hidden structure behind his trillion-dollar projects, NEOM's secrets, the real cost of Vision 2030, and the decision that could alter Saudi Arabia's path for generations. Stay tuned.